biggest story you must tell your children is the story of you and who you are and how you became who you are.
Yeah, I think the entertainment industry accepts who you are as an individual because that's what we're working in, is we're working in an individual world.
Whatever your job is as a woman, whatever you decide your role is in society, it's valuable.
Hello, Gina.
Hi,
I'm Lorna.
It's a pleasure to meet you.
Likewise.
I'm intrigued to hear your story.
For sure. I am proud to say my mum and dad are still married. So I grew up in a very, very stable household with an older brother.
Where?
South East London, Abbey Wood. It's proudly known as the place that gave us So Solid crew.
I remember that.
Exactly. But yeah, I always say I'm from the rough part of London because no cab driver ever wants to go South East London after 10 o'clock.
So it's quite a tough environment.
Yeah, well, I was never witness to that but I think it's because I was brought up to be everyone's friend, so you say hi to the people you pass as opposed to be scared of them and you break down a barrier. So
what do your parents do?
Mum, they're both retired now, but Mum worked for the Inland Revenue. She was a pay-as-you-earn tax collector, not popular. And Dad was a mechanic. Yeah,
fantastic. So he fixed things.
He fixed things, exactly, which is kind of ironic. I can fix a few things in my work now, or have had to fix a few things. So.
What was he like as a dad? What did he sort of tell you?
Dad's way was the highway. If Dad decided where we went on holiday, Dad decided what we did on a Sunday, but not in an imposing way. If Dad wanted to do it, we did it. If we wanted to do it, we'd test the water with Dad. But his decisions have always been right.
It's that pole in the centre of who you are from a very early age, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I'm Lorna Mann. I'm very proud of that. And if I was ever to get married, I've never really thought of marriage as important to me, but I will always remain Lorna Mann. Very proud of being that person.
Good for you. I never quite understand why women have to or feel they have to change their name. So
absolutely.
Good on you.
Yeah. And what about yourself?
Well, mine was I was born in British Guiana. It was British Guiana at that time. It was part of the Commonwealth. And it was growing up where Britain was, the motherland. It was the place, and my mother had sort of the Queen on the wall, Wedgwood, all the things. So even though we weren't British, we were going to be more British than the British almost.
More than me.
But we just had a really strong sense of our identity was linked to that of Britain, and that our loyalty was there, and it would be the highest accolade to actually have a British education. But my parents were incredibly hardworking. My father, at the age of 14, was working in a petrol station. He had no qualifications. He didn't really go to school, and he saved to put himself through school and ended up as Attorney General in the country. And he was always a person who taught me real lessons of life, in that you should never take anything for granted, that whatever we do, we have a responsibility to other people. And he and I had an amazing relationship. When I was a little girl, I was quite a curious little girl. I didn't take much for granted. So I was always the annoying one going, why, or asking questions. And I had really, really long hair, and he would come home and brush my hair at the end of an evening and tell me about his cases and who he was working with. And he did a lot of work. He started off in the civil service, working pro bono, and then went to become one of the most famous criminal barristers. But he never lost his soul or his humility. And when I was about doing my A-levels, I was doing English, and one of the books I was studying was a John Mortimer play called Voyage Around My Father, which is an excellent. And I read this line when I thought, gosh, that's my father. It said he sent words into the courtroom as if they were soldiers into battle.
Oh, wow.
My mum was very different to my father in that he was actually the softer of the two. My mum was definitely a disciplinarian, and her thing was that you must not take anything for granted. You must not waste anything. So every bit of string, she was probably an eco-warrior before the phrase was even dreamt up. Everything was saved. Every can found its place in being something else. Or every bit of string, she literally saved everything, because she always said, you cannot take anything we have for granted. It could all be gone tomorrow. And that was so strong in her belief. Yeah. And she said that we have to work. You have to work hard, that nobody's going to give you anything. And I think those two things were the things that my mum was just so clear with all of us, that we had to work hard and not take anything for granted. I mean, I just thought anything is possible. And that's actually the thing that both my parents told us. You can be anything you want to be, as long as you remember to be true to yourself. And that's something I've always taken through my life. And it's got nothing to do with money or material things. It's actually about how strong you feel about yourself. And I don't know if it's nature or nurture. Might be a bit of both. But I think the solidity of that upbringing was then ripped away from me when I was 11, because my father had gotten into politics, and we weren't in a safe place. So we were sent to England and to a tiny little boarding school in Eastbourne, which was lovely. But then 2 years after that, we had currency restrictions, and my brother, who was 15, and myself, 13, found that my parents couldn't send us any money. They couldn't pay the fees, but they had just enough money to buy a little flat. So we started living on our own. I sort of lied about my age and got a job as a chambermaid in a hotel along Eastbourne seafront.
Right.
So I'd go to work for 2 hours in the morning, go to school, come back, work on the weekends, and that's how we survived. We sort of did anything and everything.
That's amazing. My mum, but what she did is she helped encourage a creative side of me, where it is lovely. But even to the extent of, if it was just simply reading the Sunday papers or flicking, I used to borrow our next door neighbour's fashion magazines, because she was this wonderful glamorous woman that lived next door. But Mum and I would sit through when Marie Claire was a real fashion bible at the time in the 90s, and Vogue as well. But we'd sit there and fantasize about the clothes and the shoes and whatever that may be. And I think that led me down a path of wanting to know what that side of the world was like that side being the entertainment world, because we were in southeast London where people didn't have careers in Hollywood or who knows what. It was a dream to us, and I think Mum allowed me to dream.
It's interesting as well when you have children, because I work all the time and I'm a bit of a workaholic. You know, people say, oh, well, you have your children, don't you feel guilty? Because I know a lot of working women who feel guilty that they're not there for their children. And I decided that the way, because I wanted to have it all, I was going to, you know, I've chosen the life I have. And I decided that it wasn't about me being with my children all the time. It's how close they feel to my heart. So from a very early age, I have made them feel so loved, so that it doesn't matter if I'm not there. They know that I love them. I don't have to physically be there. It's not about how much time, it is how loved that child feels. I often say that the story we forget to tell our children is our own story, because we tell them, they only know us as their parents now. But what were you like when you were their age? You know, what were you, a naughty child? What did you get up to? What was your relationship with your family, your children? Because then it builds up in them an acknowledgement of who they are in a much more solid way. So I always say to people, the biggest story you must tell your children is the story of you, and who you are, and how you became who you are. So that's, I think, my parents did that, because both my parents told me a lot about their ancestry and what happened to them and how they grew up. And I've learned that lesson, and I do that with my children. So I think storytelling has come down.
It's the same on my side as well. We're an Irish Catholic background, so we tell
we're
a lot of
Catholics,
stories.
American Catholics, so similar.
Going into work, I never thought I was going into work in a temporary measure to then go home and be mum, or to go home and be a housewife. That was never what I was brought up to be. I have people on my team that have left to have children and are happily married, but that wasn't a compromise. I think the entertainment industry accepts who you are as an individual, because that's what we're working in, is we're working in an individual world.
You're very fortunate, because in the world of business and finance in the city, it's so rigid that for a woman, that the infrastructures are so rigid, it's really tough. And what I find is that a lot of women get support when they first come in. So there's this huge drive to attract more women, to get diversity is the now buzzword that everyone talks about. But then they're not supported when they get to that stage where they want to have a family, or they have a young family, because they still have to come into work. It's all, you know, be at your desk, be in the office, and be seen to do your job, rather than being judged by the output. And it's really tough. And I often say to women that whatever you choose to do has worth. And if you choose to be at home looking after your children, that is actually one of the most important jobs there is. And do not ever say, I'm just a mum if you ever go out. Because if I then go to social events and you'll have some of the men in the city who are very senior who come bring their wives along, and I start talking to the wives and they'll say, oh, no, what do you do? And they go, oh, I'm just a mum. I just think the devaluing of motherhood is something that I worry about, because there's all this focus on being working women that, you know, whatever your job is as a woman, whatever you decide your role is in society, it's valuable.
Yeah.
And you have to be happy that you do that. Do not, there's a phrase I use, don't be mourning for the life you thought you were going to have. Live in the moment, the life you do have, and be joyous about the gifts it has and it gives you.
Yeah.
Because then everyone around you is happier.
Yeah.
Everyone is happier.
I completely agree, and I am so blessed that I work, especially like Lionsgate has women. It has more women as heads department and more as
Fabulous.
Yeah, it is fabulous. And don't get me wrong, there is a wonderful, wonderful man at the top, and he supports us all. And his number 2 is a young lady that has 2 young children, and she manages everything because he allows her the freedom to do that.
I always find it incredible when I meet people and they say, oh, you're nothing like we expected you to be. And part of that is because the media has painted me as a certain persona because it sells their headlines, their papers or whatever. But I think also in the past, women thought they had to be tougher. I mean, we were wearing, when I started work, big shoulder pads and pinstripe suits and very little makeup, and it was sort of both the men expected and the women expected that's the way we had to be. And I think we've learned to be more feminine, but at the same time there is still this perception that I'm this really, really tough woman. And I get asked, I got told the other day by this man, he said, oh, it's amazing how well you've done despite being a woman of colour. And I find it extraordinary that he saw that as a double handicap. And I thought, actually, you have so many biases to control yourself. It's your problem, not mine. I have a work persona. I go to work to get things done. And I don't have time to be anything but myself. And if people don't like that, that's their problem, not my problem. I know why I'm there. I've got something to do. The things I try to avoid when I'm at work, which doesn't mean it always happens, is, if I read something or someone says, I will have a little cry. In the little back room, but I don't ever want someone to see that, because then they've won. Because if I'm confronted by a bully, I don't want them to see that they're getting to me. So that's the only bit of myself I hide when I'm at work. But apart from that, I'm just me.
Completely the same. And I, at the top of my tree within my department at the company, which was a job I got at 24 and was the young.
Extraordinary.
I know. And
absolutely amazing.
And I pinch myself that my employer saw that in me at such a young age, because I had no idea what I was really doing at that point. I just wanted to do the job. And I think that that's why he employed me at that age, is I had that passion to do the job at hand and to lead the team to do that. It doesn't matter who I am, how old I am, where I've come from, what I've done. And, yes, the entertainment industry is somewhat liberal, but it has a reputation of employing people from privileged backgrounds, because the money is from
school, the right background, yes.
Or you never know, dad, who mum and dad are that might have money to invest. Yeah, it's all about connections. When I had none, I had no connections to give. I had passion to give,
and that's again something we have in common.
Yeah, exactly. And so to be a leader for me is to be my most genuine self, and that shows happiness, but it also shows frustration and sadness. And I treat my team, I call them my kids, and I'm like, come on kids, we're off to lunch, or come on, we're off kids. And I hope that they embrace that part of me, because I think of them as my family. They're my Monday to Friday family.
If you have that real passion, you'll be successful, because you'll put your heart and soul into it. And when I hire now, I tend to I'm presuming that everybody who's applied for a job with us has the right qualifications.
100% agree.
So
yeah.
I don't
care.
I've just completely put it aside. But what I want to know is passion, loyalty. I want to know that they're flexible and that they're muck in, that they'll roll their sleeves up. I want commitment.
Yeah.
And anything else I can train. And that's what I think as female leaders we do as female bosses. It's quite different.
Yeah.
We're far more matriarchal in our approach, I think, and inclusive.
Yeah.
And I think it's wonderful.
Yeah.
And I wish it could be in my
everywhere.
passion of politics. No, I call it, I want to womanize politics. We've womanized where we are. And I think that's a great thing, because it's not saying we're better or we're just equal. We just bring different skills, softer skills to what we do.
It's so true, because there are times when, like, if I meet someone and you get that vibe that they're okay with me being with who I am in my most genuine self, so that is a hug or a high five. I wish my boss would do that. I wish my male head of the company would just break down a tiny bit of a barrier, because he is an amazing friend, but he doesn't show that side of him at work. He's the opposite, in which
he's going to have to work through why he's not doing that, because actually most of the men I know have gotten to that place through watching and learning, but it could be something within him that he needs to overcome. But I think carry on encouraging him, because he'll get there.
I'll beat it out. Yeah, we'll get it out of him for sure. I fell into this job in publicity and only for film when I was 14, doing mandatory work experience. I wanted to go into retail, and I applied to Harvey Nick, Selfridges and Harrods, and they all said no, funnily enough. So I kind of sulkily went into school, and my school careers advisor said, go here, and handed me a piece of paper, and it was my first job that I was given, which was for a company called DDA, Dennis Davidson Associates. The reason I tell that story is because I didn't really have a choice, in inverted commas, for the job that I did. I fell into it by chance, and I grasped it because I loved the environment I was in. And for the 3 years that I did work experience, I basically, after that work experience placement, I went back every school holiday until I'd done my A-levels, because I just loved being around the people that was in that office, because it felt like family. Is publicity the right career path for me? Who knows? I don't know what else is out there, because that's from 14 to now 34. That's all I've done, and I don't look back with regret for that. I have taken this path that was handed to me, for want of a better phrase, and I've made it my own. And so I don't regret it. I don't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. When someone says, "What did you want to be when you grow up?" Didn't want to be an astronaut. Didn't want to be a hairdresser. I can't remember what my answer was to that.
Mine's very different, because my father, all I wanted to be was a criminal barrister. I just wanted to go into law, and my entire household was all about social justice and politics and what it meant to really help people who couldn't help themselves. So that's all I wanted to do. But I never finished my law degree because I was attacked, and I couldn't finish my finals. So I sort of took some time out to recover and get back. And I always intended on going back to university to do my law degree, but I didn't, because while I was doing that, I got offered a job, in summer to do a bit of modelling, and then I got offered to do a bit of events, and I came across BMW, and I'm such a petrol head. I then fell in with BMW. I found out that I was really good at marketing, so I got into the marketing team and the events team and did that sort of work for a while, and then went back to university to do a degree in marketing rather than law, because I discovered that I had this real flair for something that a world I knew nothing about, a bit like yours, and I really loved it. I love the creativity of it. But one thing I'll always say, that having studied law, the disciplines it gave me have been with me throughout all my careers and everything I've done. But then I decided quite young that I couldn't rely on anybody else to look after my daughter. It had to be me, and I was never going to send her away. She's now 30, but her mental age is about sort of 5 or 6. And because that sort of lioness in me wanted to protect her and look after her, I thought the only way I could do this with enough flexibility is actually to run my own business, to have my own business. So then I started my own agency, very, arrogantly, if you want, whatever the word is you want to say. I rocked up. I started this business. I thought, I'm going to rock up to the city. I'm going to start this business that doesn't exist, a marketing company just for financial services, because I'd realized that they really were out of touch with financial services. Marketing didn't really exist. And I took everything I'd learned from the car industry, which was so advanced in marketing and understanding how you deal with customers. And I thought, I'm just going to translate it to an industry that doesn't actually understand how it works. Yeah. The time I compromised myself was in that exhausted period of working hard. My agency was Bath, Bristol, London. We were incredibly successful. So trying to hold that all together with my daughter, I made the biggest mistake of my life, in that I wanted someone to help me, and I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful to give her a family and to have a partner? So there's this wonderful Irish man who came into my life who seemed to be the blessing of it all. He loved children, he had his own children, he seems incredibly supportive of me. Day after we got married, everything changed. And he basically wanted to control me. And because I had been so honest and open with him, he knew exactly how to destroy me. And that's what he spent years doing. So I was at a point where I was so mentally and physically crippled, I didn't know who I was.
Right.
I was a victim of domestic violence. I talk openly about this because there is this perception that only weak women suffer from domestic violence, or women who are not educated or whatever. It's not. It can be any woman and any level of society or life. And what happened to me was he broke me, and I put myself back together, but the cracks are always going to be there.
Yeah.
So I remind myself not to give up on who I am, not to ever compromise myself, not to get myself into a position where somebody else takes control of my mind and my personality and my heart. My daughter saved me, and she has so many times in my life, because I just looked at her and thought, if I die, who looks after you?
Yeah.
And so she saved me. I had to leave because of her. And so I left with nothing. And, you know, we slept in a car for 3 weeks. I had no idea where I was going. No. But I just left and walked away. And I knew I was strong enough to pick myself up, to look after her, and to build a business again. I just knew I could do it. And I know a lot of women don't have that strength, because when you are so crippled and you have no idea who you are, and everything has been taken from you, it is the hardest thing in the world to step up, open that door and walk out of it. I'm a really positive, hopeful person, and I think when it comes to domestic violence or any of the issues that women have had, or anybody that actually has had to hide in the past, be it mental health, we have so much support now. You can reach out, be it online or offline, to so many more forums. But for specifically around domestic violence, what I found incredibly helpful was actually going to a GP, and they can tell, and you can go there and talk to them, and they'll direct you to the right places, and they'll help you leave in a really caring way. And that wasn't there when I was around. And the police even, you know, I remember going to the police and they said, oh, well, that's not something we get involved with. It's about families, and it's between you and your husband, you know. And so we have moved on. We haven't moved on enough, but we've moved on. And there is much more support. And also you can share. And that sense of not feeling that you are the only person in that situation, you're the only person suffering, that camaraderie is so important.
Fundamentally, you're dealing with a bully,
Yeah.
and bullying, there's no cure for bullying. Do you know, like, I know it sounds really simple to say,
No,
but
there is. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And it frightens me, because you know, I have been bullied through every stage of school and work, and some of it anonymously, like, and social media can be a blessing and a curse. If bullying can still exist, then domestic violence will still exist, because it's just the most, in my opinion, it's the most extreme case of that, and it makes me sad.
It's extraordinary. We've both been talking about bullying, the fact that we've been standing up to bullying. And I said, you know, I'm concerned about where we are in the world. But I never envisaged, when I brought what I thought was a very simple case, you know, against the government, standing up for what's right, that I'd experienced a whole different level of bullying. And what it did, it's actually made me question how far I thought we'd come when it came to tolerance of women, of ethnic minorities, of immigrants. I realized that actually perhaps some of it was very superficial. I mean, I had a Viscount who put on Facebook a £5,000 bounty to have me run over and killed, who went to prison. And it's the first time anybody's gone to prison for sort of an online threat like that. My attitude to all of this is that I will not let their voices trump mine. The more they bully me, the more they threaten me, my children, my family, the more I'm thinking, there is no way I'm letting you get away with this.
No.
So my fear of what could happen if they were the voices in controlling society and the future, that fear drives me to not be fearless or brave, because those things are not, I just don't have, but to just carry on fighting and speaking up, because I will not, under any circumstances, let bullies win. Why are people taking the time and the effort? I know, it's the effort to do all of this. And I just don't, I mean, I just think there's a permissiveness that's changed in society right now, in that somehow those of extremism, whatever their view is, they think that in the name of free speech, they can be as bullying and as aggressive and as demeaning and misogynistic as they like. And it doesn't mean anything. I worry about the fragility of young people, and also this idea that they're all chasing ideals and avatars and images that are not real. They're manufactured. You know, the bodies that they worship are actually all been bought, or the faces, or the you know, the careers that are so connected, you know, to some. They don't really quite realize how nepotistic. I mean, you probably see that in your industry behind the scenes they are.
Yeah.
But they're buying into a fake world where real people don't exist. And so I just wanted to write a book about a real life, my real life, and hope that it would create a real sense of energy in them. And how do they, if you like, create a strategy for failing? We're all going to fail at something. And actually, it's the thing it binds us all together. It's not success, it's actually failing that binds us all together. So how do we create a real strength and resilience inside of us to cope with that? And so that's what my book is about. It's about the fact that I failed a lot, and I've got lots of things wrong, but sharing some of the ways I found to be strong.
What I love about what I do, which is basically promoting those to the public and making the public want to see these films, and I think cinema is a gem to be cherished. But it's my mantra every day to find something I love about the project and focus on that point. And even if it's a negative, you have to turn that negative into a positive, and that makes you a stronger person. Like it means that I will look for the best in everybody. So whether someone's on the attack or on the defence, and in any way or shape or form in my life, whether it's at work, at home, in doing whatever it is I'm doing, I try and spin that positive. What I've learned is that the consumer wants everything when they want it, how they want it, in whichever shape or form that they want it, whether that's the story or who knows what. So I work for a company that has agreed that we have a diverse range of films to release, because you can't pigeonhole yourself into just being the superhero distributor or the documentary or the whatever. I'm so blessed that the company looks for projects that they are attached to. I'm finding of recent that true stories and stories about characters that actually exist are becoming more and more popular with audiences. An example of that is at the end of last year, we released a film called Wonder, which was based on a best-selling novel.
It was an amazing film.
It was amazing, and again about bullying, and it had an amazing anti-bullying message that as a company, my department, the publicity department and the marketing team worked together on a global initiative of World Kindness Day, which was basically be kind, do kind. And I think that with every campaign that we put together for any kind of release, it should have some sort of, once you've seen a film, you should take away, yes, that's a good film, but what have you learnt from it? And if you've learnt something intellectually, great. If you've learned something emotionally or spiritually, even better, I think. And that's, I dream of every distribution company feeling that way, that they have a responsibility to influence how people act, not only how they react.
But that's the thing we both have in common, I think, is the culture of the organisations in which we work. Has meant that we can be the best that we can be, and we can do the best that we can do in those organisations. And that's fantastically powerful as a woman to be able to do it, actually as anybody. But for women, that's our place, isn't it?
Yeah.
To bring the heart back into whatever we do, and I think that's really exciting.
I think for leaders, that's our place. I don't think it's just generally about women. I think I think as a leader, do you, be you.
It's whenever I'm asked about what would you sort of lessons or what would you tell women, young women, men today or for tomorrow, I sort of am hesitant, because I think actually finding your own path is a really, really important thing. But if I were to say three things, one of them I'd say was to, when you see bad stuff, however small it is, call out the small stuff before it becomes big. You have a responsibility. Wherever you see something wrong, call it out, however small you think it is. And the second thing is, I think that we've sort of socialized into not listening to our own voices, that you get this feeling in the pit of your stomach when you know something is wrong. And you should listen to that, because that ancient voice within us is so important. And your tummy is your second brain. You should listen to that pit in your stomach. And the third thing I'd say is, remember to hug and hold, and don't live in a virtual world where you have virtual friends, because actually there's nothing better than a face-to-face conversation, the human touch, and just to know that there's a physical contact, because we are social beings. And in this world of technology, I just fear that they are living in too much of a virtual world.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. And to add to that, I'd also say, like, don't try and conform to be what other people think. Like, be true to you. You don't have to make everyone like you. You don't have
That's so important.
You don't have to make everyone dislike you either. But it's
I'm quite good at doing that.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd agree with that. But I think the most important thing, I think, for future generations is to be genuine, to be honest, and to just realise you can't please everyone.
Very important.
Yeah.